Welcome everyone. This is the first of a series of celebrations today, marking a year since the COP, where we're celebrating locally led adaptation, the principles of locally led adaptation. It's actually marking 2 years since they were launched at the Climate Adaptation Summit in the Netherlands in January of last year. It's been an incredible journey over the last 2 years. We started with I can't remember, about 70 organisations endorsed at that first event, and it's been a growing movement. I've been hearing from colleagues and friends that around COP, if you're in an event about adaptation and nobody mentions the principles, then you know you're not really with the right crowd. I've also been told it's really coming quite central to the discussions in the negotiations themselves. I think it is a really important time when we're talking about doubling adaptation, for which, thanks to the UK, we're here in their pavilion, for that promise to double adaptation. It's a really important time to make sure that that doubling finance is used well and effectively and reaches the people that most need it. So for that reason, all the more, we're here to talk about the principles and to welcome new endorsers, but also to hear from those who have endorsed what they've been doing over the last year. So let me hand over to and I should say, assume, because I know so many people in the room, that everyone knows me. I'm Claire Sakya with IIED. Pass over to my co-facilitator, Nisha.
Thanks, Claire, and welcome everyone. My name is Nisha Krishnan, and I lead climate for the World Resources Institute's Africa Regional Office. As Claire mentioned, LLA is all over COP this year, which is an amazing thing to see, and I would say that there's been at least 2 events that we've co-hosted at the Resilience Hub on closing the intermediary gap and trying to think about how finance actually flows to the ground, as well as looking at accountability mechanisms around locally led adaptation. And I want to say that's only 2 of over 70 or 80 events that all of our partners in the locally led adaptation community of practice are putting on over the next 2 weeks, and so it's a great time to be within the locally led adaptation community. I just wanted to hand over back to Claire to start to introduce our first speaker and go through the program. Thanks.
Thanks very much. So for our opening remarks, I'd like to welcome Debbie Palmer, who's the incoming, just recently appointed Director of Energy, Climate and Environment at the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office in the UK. Debbie.
Thank you very much, Claire. Thanks, Nisha. Good afternoon, everybody. It's absolutely lovely to be with you here in the UK Pavilion on Adaptation and Agriculture Day. It's wonderful. Throughout the COP26 presidency, the UK really focused on emphasising putting adaptation at the heart of our climate action. And I think in the year since then, we've really seen the urgency of this work as climate impacts have spiralled, frankly, around the world in very, very visible and injurious ways. We made progress, and we're proud of the progress we made at COP26, including, as Claire mentioned, on the commitment to double adaptation finance, and indeed the launch of the work programme towards a global goal on adaptation. So we've made some progress, and that's really good, but it's right that now we're focusing specifically on this important question of locally led adaptation. And the reason why is because we know that adaptation needs are highly context specific, and we know that it's local actors who are often the most experienced risk managers and the knowledge and the holders of the key knowledge that's needed. And that's why I think we need adaptation that is locally led and articulated and owned and implemented, and that ensures that those on the front line of climate change have access to the power, access to the resources, and access to the finance that's needed. And that we increase the ability of people to take the decisions on things that most affect them. So that's why we're here today. That's why we're so focused on locally led adaptation. And I'm really pleased that over 90 governments and organisations have now endorsed the principles for locally led adaptation that Claire mentioned, because these principles aim to put people and communities, and in fact the most affected people and communities, right at the heart of our climate action. And the UK is proud to have been one of the first governments to endorse the principles, and it's great to see other endorsers who are here today. We know that over $450 million has now been mobilised for work to enhance locally led approaches. and we saw a series of dialogues held in recent months ahead of COP27 with grassroots organisations, with donors and with others to discuss what implementation of these principles will look like in practice, on the ground and in reality. So now we're moving firmly towards action, which is positive. And the UK is supporting a series of innovative initiatives, including the LDC Initiative for Effective Adaptation and Resilience, better known as LIFE AR. So we're really proud to have announced £10 million for new support. That came at COP26, but we'd like to continue encouraging others to join this groundbreaking initiative. And we're also investing up to £45 million for the Asian Development Bank's led Community Resilience Partnership Programme. So again, another step, I think, in a really positive direction. So as I said, I'm proud and pleased that we've been making progress, but we know there is so much more that we need to do. We need to see more work from governments to coordinate and target our finance even more effectively. We need donors and climate finance providers to be reforming the systems and the allocation processes to reach the people who need this money at local levels. We need the creation of bottom-up mechanisms to identify and articulate those local needs and the local priorities and make sure those voices are heard right the way up the system. And finally, of course, we all know we need political will to support these new approaches that are so desperately needed. So today, I hope we can have a really substantive, really action-orientated discussion on how collectively, as a group and as a community of people who care about this, we can better implement locally led adaptation. I'm really delighted that we're inviting such a great range of speakers today to discuss how we are going to change the way we do business. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Debbie. It's been amazing to have the UK provide such strong leadership on locally led adaptation, and delighted that you're supporting such important initiatives. So now, on behalf of the LDC Group, I'd like to invite Mr. Bouna Manalfal, who's a technical advisor to the LDC presidency of Senegal. Please take the floor.
Hello, I'm Fall, Bouna Manel, and coming here to represent Madeleine Diouf Sarr, LDC President. He is present. And I want to talk today for the 5 Life R principles. Life R have 5 principles, and the first principle is work together jointly on a shared and equal platform, LDCs and the international communities to come together as equal through a platform to openly discuss, co-create and share solutions to address the climate challenge that we face across our respective countries. This platform aims to build trust, transparency and mutual accountability, and presents the opportunity to outline joint solutions to some of our greatest challenges, including the transaction cost of accessing support and the need to develop the climate capabilities of LDC institutions. The second principle of Life Art is invest behind integrated, holistic, and ambitious climate planning across the whole of society. We will work with the whole of society to integrate climate adaptation, mitigation, and resilience into national and local development objectives and plans. We have initiated work on long-term strategy under the Paris Agreement in a number of LDC, and we ask the international community to do the same to ensure a collective response that puts the world on a pathway toward a 1.5 degree world along a climate resilient pathway by 2020. 3, commit to shared goal of 70 finance flow supporting action on the ground in LDCs by 2030. We will work jointly together to strengthen LDC delivery mechanism to ensure that all proposals and projects commit to spend at least 70% of the fund on the communities where climate impacts are most felt. This delivery mechanism will enable vertical integration with government system from national to local level and horizontal collaboration across different sectors, enabling devolved community-led decision making that integrate community knowledge with the best technical advice. 4. Work at the pace of individual LDCs aiming to build long-term national and local institution systems, structure, and capabilities. We will work jointly together at the pace and direction set by individual LDCs under this shared 2050 vision, seeking to move away from a pace that is determined and set externally, achieving greater national ownership. This will enhance in-country expertise, build strong local institutions, and stimulate whole-of-society response with a special focus on women, youth, and other marginalized groups. We will also work closely with least developed countries, university consortium on climate change, and other LDCs institutions in country to develop tomorrow's leaders and national experts investing in capabilities, curricula, training, research, and knowledge. 5. Leave no country and no one behind. At LDC level, we commit to work together to find solutions for the most fragile states and countries that are often left behind in the fight against climate change, seeking ways to overcome challenge, learning together and building capabilities to deliver the SDGs and Paris, Sendai and Aichi commitments to ensure that LDC government continue to show leadership at individual level, leaving no one behind, will mean that we create more inclusive governance, policy, and institution with principles that put the first behind first and sustainability address the underlying cause of poverty and vulnerability. We shall challenge social barriers that exclude and limit people's potential as we focus on gender transformation and social justice. We will work with women and the youth who comprise the highest population in most developing countries and yet are the poorest. We will engage national ministry and local government, private sector, non-government organizations, cities and communities to improve climate decision making, build a strong foundation of trust, break down silos and encourage collaboration. We call on other development partners to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for letting us know, telling us about the Life AR initiative and how those principles fit with the principles for locally led adaptation. We're handing out prizes today for all of those who have been putting the principles into action, and it's a poster of the principles, so you can have it up at home. So with great thanks to our two opening speakers, I'd like to invite our first panel to come up. If we could have Dr. Pem Narayan Kandal, Heather McGray, and Rennie Van Hal to our panel. And we're going to have we're going to ask you each in turn to tell us about why you endorse the principles, what you're doing through your government or your organisation to deliver those principles, and what future progress will look like. So, if I could start with Dr. Pem Narayan Kandal, who I should say in many ways Nepal started this over 10 years ago with their locally led adaptation plan of action. So in many ways have been the inspiration of this entire approach. Please, Dr.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Clear Sakya, I know her very well. And distinguished panelists, organizer, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, let me take this opportunity to thank the organizer for hosting this important event and panel discussion. It is important to note that local communities are on the forefront of climate change impact. That is very, very true. And local lead adaptation principles set are to empower local communities, because local communities are very much impacted by the climate change, and therefore these local lead adaptation principles are very much related to the people, to the community, so that they can be empowered and they can implement the activities. It is also my great pleasure to inform you that Nepal is known, I mentioned this word at this morning also, as the leader of the community-based natural resource management and local lead adaptation. So Nepal is the leader. We have handed over all the forest, all the national forest to the local communities. So they are managing the natural resources. So that also helps for climate change mitigation and adaptation as well. So Nepal is a pioneer. And also local lead adaptation, I mentioned that because Nepal is the first member, as I know, endorsed this locally led adaptation principle. I did that, as I remember. And also local adaptation plan of action. Nepal has implemented local adaptation plan, to adapt the climate change. So Nepal is the first country. So therefore, Nepal is the leader of the climate change adaptation, of the locally lead climate change adaptation. So that is true, therefore. So the question, how Nepal is empowering the local communities, and also why Nepal is the leader. So that is the question maybe I have to answer. Because we localize the adaptation. So people are responsible, communities are responsible to conduct the adaptation activities. So they are the responsible. All the resources. For example, our policy said that more than 80% resources should go to the local community for locally lead adaptation. And then we are decentralizing the policy, and people own the policies. In Nepal, it is also important to communicate that in Nepal, particularly in forestry sector, in environment sector, we are formulating policy by participating the local communities. Therefore, they are very big ownership to translate the policy into ground. And thirdly, mainstreaming the policy and program. So we are mainstreaming all the policy into local level and community level. Therefore, Nepal has been doing very good job in locally lead adaptation, and very much, following the principle of locally led adaptation. I think time is 1 minute. Thank you.
That was perfect timing. We're a bit tight on time, so I'm going to have to be very strict, but that was absolutely perfect. Thank you so much. So I think I'm going to just go give these as we go along. So thank you so much for your leadership. Thank you. So Heather, could we ask you to speak next? And it's very exciting, really innovating in how do you govern the finance. Heather, please, over to you.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you to IIED and WRI for their leadership and partnership on this work on local leadership. I'm the director of the Climate Justice Resilience Fund, and we're an unusual funder. We pool resources from philanthropic foundations in order to support women and youth and indigenous peoples in building resilience and scaling their own solutions from the grassroots upward. We've been in operation for about 6 years now, and really the principles were kind of a natural fit for us. Many of our grantee partners who work on adaptation around the world were involved in the development of the principles. And I think almost everything that we do, that we support, kind of counts as locally led adaptation, even though some of it is not necessarily at the local level. It's very much involved in bringing local agency to challenges at the national level and at the global level. Much of this And sometimes this is counterintuitive to a United Nations event crowd. But much of what we have found is most important for locally led adaptation isn't so much about the bricks and mortar and nuts and bolts of the work, although that's important, but the voice and power and organizing. This is where we've found the real magic in locally led adaptation, is when those things are linked together with concrete efforts that build people's resilience and improve their lives. We've been undergoing some interesting transitions over the last year, and this is, I think, really what Claire wanted me to speak about, and this is where we as a fund have been most living into the principles of local leadership. I currently report to a board that is comprised of representatives of the foundations that have pooled their money in the fund. So I report to 7 people who are based in North America and Europe, and they're almost all white, and that's a very typical scenario for funding globally. They took the brave decision last year as a board to disband and to reconstitute the governance of the Climate Justice Resilience Fund for its second phase. We've reached a kind of a horizon in our work, and we're launching a second 6-year phase of funding that will start next year. In time for that start, we have been recruiting a new board comprised of activists and practitioners from all over the world, and we are going to hand off the power from those foundations to the people who are closer to the solution set on the ground. That handoff's actually happening later tonight. We will announce the membership of our new board. I can tell you they come from 8 different countries. They work at local level, at national and regional level. They work at global levels. Some of them are here at Charm, and I'd be delighted to meet them, to introduce you to them. And I'm going to save the reveal of who's on the board for just a couple hours from now. But all of you are welcome to our reception if that's of interest. You can attend our reception and then come to the LLA reception, which is what I'm going to try to do. And we hope that this will offer an experiment and a model for others who are thinking about ways to shift not only what's done on the ground and how that is led, but how decisions about funding are led and how they are made. And so this is just one milestone. We're on a longer participatory journey, but it's very exciting, and it is a real shift. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So for innovative governance, I think CJRF have won this year's prize. So René van Hal, we are so delighted to have you from the Netherlands. We've been hearing so much about all the ways you're thinking through applying the principles. Please have the floor.
No, thank you so much. And for principles, I think I can be very easy. It was laid out very clear by Claire and Nisha and our kind neighbors of the UK why you need to do this. So I'm not going to repeat that because that would be tedious. So what is my challenge? There's a very positive thing. I manage a portfolio of grants on water, food, energy, climate of now about 730 million euros annually, and that's grown to 1 billion. And that's super important because that will all contribute to climate finance, and that allows us to work on all these issues where we want to make change. My challenge is that, of course, as a matter of, also sometimes it's just very practical matters, most of it is not locally led. I have to be honest about that. So I need to really also work on an overhaul of my portfolio. And that's not necessarily going to be easy. But of course, what are the principles of that overhaul? Well, let's say for the local communities, it needs to be predictable. We need to be a predictable partner. And we also need to show some flexibility. So it's also a lot about trust and how we are going to do this, because I can assure you, we don't have any capacity in The Hague to go through all these reviews and reports and whatsoever. So we're also looking at ways to sort of pool this and work together with our friends of the UK, for example, to make this happen. Because you know, in the sense of accountable, I'm also accountable to the Dutch taxpayers. So we need to organize this with each other. But it goes without saying that this is the way to go forward. We've always been advocating it, and now we really need to put the money where our mouth is. Things that I'm kind of proud of is how we work with civil society. So we have this Voices for Just Climate Action, and we also have the African Activists for Climate Justice. And of course, we also work through the beautiful Climate and Development Knowledge Network. So that's all very nice and dainty, but we have to make the shift. I would also like to invite you to do something else. The world convenes in March for the UN Water Conference. And we all know that climate change always manifests itself into little or too much water, and that hurts, because water is basically very badly managed, because the girls and the guys who are in charge of it politically oftentimes don't have the clout to say no to the Minister of Agriculture or say no to other ministers. They're probably oftentimes sort of on the lowest ladder of the political hierarchy. And that's not very helpful to actually really value water. So I would also really call on you, especially when we speak about locally led adaptation, let us also be smarter about how we manage water. Because on a local level, people know what's going wrong with water management, and they need to call on their politicians, and they need to organize ourselves to get that thing better done. So please join us for the UN World Water Conference that we co-host with Tajikistan, and in which we really would like to present a very ambitious water action agenda, especially also on locally led adaptation. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much. So we've just heard from three countries and organisations who endorsed last year and setting out what they've done over the last year, and a big hand to them for the innovation and the leadership that they've shown in both policy, governance and in changing your portfolio. And I'm now going to hand over. So thank you very much to all of you. And I'm going to hand over to my co-facilitator to introduce those new endorsers for the year.
Thanks, Claire. Please do. Thanks. So as Claire said, we do have some new endorsers this year. We are actually almost at 100 endorsers over the last 2 years. And so it is my distinct honor to welcome to the chairs up here, Mr. Alfred Okot Ikudi, the Permanent Secretary for Water and Environment from Uganda, Ms. Anna Merrifield, the Head of Unit for Climate and Environment Diplomacy in Finland, and last but not least, Ms. Krista Joy Burton from the Department of Environment in Antigua and Barbuda. Thanks very much for joining us today. You're all new endorsers of the locally led adaptation principles. So similarly, it'd be great to understand why you've endorsed these principles, what you're hoping to do through your government and organization to implement these principles, and what the future looks like in the next couple of months as you start to implement. So, Mr. Okidi, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us to share our experience. Uganda endorsed this program primarily because, as one of the LDCs, we know the issue around climate resilience and the development pathways and the demand to ensure that by 2030 we are there on the clean pathway to reduction of emissions, and 2050 we are looking at net zero emission. But this pathway is full of pains. Therefore, the principles enshrined by Life AR fits in with our aspirations, which is really to ensure that funding gets to the level where it is needed most, as opposed to the current system where less than 10% of the climate finance actually gets to the person who is badly affected by climate change. So that was our drive, and that is why we actually opted to join this. But also because it involves the local people and the local structure. And they're involved in the planning, in the initiation, so really everybody is on board. And that is a big sell for us. And it also creates the opportunity to develop the capacity of the local governments and the local people to manage issues around climate change. And this is also in line with the government of Uganda's drive to ensure that decentralization is a means of service delivery and the local person is totally involved in this service delivery. So it is really in line with our aspirations. So as Uganda, we have made some strides. We are one of the 6 front-runner countries. I'm not thumping my chest, but I think we are ahead of the other front-runner countries at the moment. And we have set up decentralized finance mechanism that is working, and we worked with the tertiary institutions, the universities, the civil society organizations. We have also developed a very robust monitoring, evaluation, and learning mechanism and system, which is already in place. We have the community of practice that is sharing this knowledge locally within the districts that are piloting this, but also giving the same information to the other 6 front-runner countries to share, so that this knowledge is not restricted within us, but we share with our colleagues so that what is beneficial and applicable to the rest of the countries, they can also get it. We also made sure that the local governments and the people at the local level are the ones who are initiating. So we did a lot of capacity development. We are still enhancing the capacity development to make sure that the funding that goes to the local level is put to the desired use as it is meant. And we are already seeing a lot of interest, and we are actually overwhelmed by the number of districts who want to come on board. And I think that is a good sign that it is working. We certainly look forward to the implementation, because this is a 10-year program that we are in, and we are confident that we'll be able to demonstrate that financing of at least 70% can reach the local level and transform the local life. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for outlining that, and actually also emphasizing the importance of ownership and capacity at the local level, and how much it takes partnerships and learning from each other to do this. If I could actually hand over to Anna next. Love to know how you're doing this within your programming in Finland.
Great, thank you very much. Well, maybe let me first of all start by saying that we're a very active member in the Champions Group on Adaptation Finance, which is a group which strives to increase the quantity, the quality and access of adaptation finance. So we see that the locally led adaptation principles are very relevant for all of these 3 aims of that group. We acknowledge that there still remains a funding gap for adaptation, including for adaptation action at the local level. And we need to ensure that we improve the access of local level actors to climate finance and improve the quantity and quality of the finance that really goes to the ground and reaches those on the local level. So as we've heard, those who are most directly impacted by climate change often have very critical contributions on how to respond and prepare for climate impacts. And we really need to ensure that the voices from the ground are heard. And that there's inclusive planning and implementation, which also then actually improves the effectiveness of adaptation. The people on the ground know what is actually needed. We need to ensure, like it was said before, that adaptation leaves no one behind. Local and indigenous knowledge and views of all genders and people of all ages and abilities need to be included for adaptation to be really, truly transformative. We need to invite those people who are disproportionately affected by climate change, including people with disabilities, to those tables where they're heard, and to ensure that they have an active role on these processes. But that alone is not enough. We need to also devolve decision-making and empower the local level with both funding and capacity to plan and implement adaptation action and ensure that it's done inclusively. I have to say, having worked previously in Uganda, I know that Uganda is doing some very great work on ensuring this devolving to the local level, including the local authorities and communities. The principles for locally led adaptation provide a good framework on how adaptation can be delivered more effectively, inclusively and equitably. And that's why we are very proud to endorse these principles at this very event. I'll just shortly say what we're planning to do now to implement. First of all, let me say that this current government is really putting an emphasis on scaling up our general climate finance, and we are very committed to funding adaptation and mitigation equally. Actually, at the moment, 47% of our climate finance is already going to adaptation. And overall, the level of climate finance should nearly double during this government term. The majority of this climate finance, it's actually channeled through multilateral organizations and funds. So for us, the best way that we can ensure the implementation of the principles is through the governance structures of these climate funds where we hold a seat. We've been working already in this respect, and we will continue to do that. And let me just say that we recently provided additional funding to the Adaptation Fund and the Least Developed Country Fund, and I'm really pleased that these funds have also endorsed the LLA principles, and we've also been actively participating in developing the recent LDCF strategy in this respect. So, going forward, we commit to advocating for LLA and finding views to further support to the principles and finding ways to support them. We'll continue to take these principles into account when we take our own actions, when we make funding decisions. And we're also really keen to hear about the experiences of those countries and communities which are benefiting from LLA or who are not yet benefiting but should be benefiting. So I was also really interested in hearing from the experiences of the previous panel. I think we need to have a further discussion on your experiences. We think that this is really a learning process for all of us, and we'll certainly, I think we'll all improve our practices as we go along. Thanks.
Thank you. It's quite commendable that you're already spending almost half on adaptation finance going forward, and I think your point about learning from each other is definitely one of the things that we do need to scale up, and as Alfred has already pointed out, there's quite a lot of lessons to learn. Maybe if I can turn to Krista Joy next. It would be lovely to hear why you've endorsed the principles and how you're thinking about taking these forward.
Thank you. So I think I'd like to just start by saying that we definitely, from Antigua and Barbuda's perspective, we share the same sentiments of our colleagues that are here today, everyone who's already spoken on the panel. We definitely believe that LLA should be a priority. And in Antigua and Barbuda, we're trying to ensure that there is more climate finance being available on the ground level to local communities. So we would have established a national fund in 2015, and that is our Sustainable Island Resource Framework Fund. And that is, the way that it's operated is to provide financing that's available for environmental as well as climate mitigation and adaptation work that's being done on the ground as it relates to our projects. And it operates as a special fund to ensure that we are meeting our environmental and our climate goals. We look at our NDCs that we have in Antigua and Barbuda, and a part of that is ensuring that there is a just transition for persons in the communities. As we try to move towards a more green economy, we're trying to ensure that we focus more on renewables. A lot of that incorporates local communities and ensuring that there is capacity being added to the labor force as well. So a lot of our projects focus on ensuring that we provide, well, through the SURF Fund especially, we provide concessional loans as well as grants. So our grants go up to $300,000 US. And we also provide, our low interest rate loans are at 2%. And we've had at least 200 plus persons who have already been able to benefit from our SURF Fund as we process both loans and grants. We try to ensure that vulnerable communities, single mothers, NGOs, so we're looking at the public and private sector to ensure that both are able to access climate finance, and that's to build resilience to their households. They're able to add renewables. And as it relates to our grants, we've had a few projects. We try to focus a lot on climate change adaptation, especially since we are a Caribbean country that is impacted by hurricanes, different extreme weather events. So through our grants, we're able to ensure that persons can submit proposals to us, access funding. We provide guidelines as well for our grants, so that as well as building capacity in that aspect, in that respect. And they're able to build resilience to their buildings. We've so far provided grants to community-based organizations, sporting groups, and as well as building resilience, we're also building their capacity through providing workshops to a lot of the organizations that are participating in our grants programs. And I think that it's definitely shown that a lot of persons are interested in it, in getting grants. We've had a lot of feedback from persons who have not been able to access it as yet, and we hope to continue to improve our projects and to get more climate financing from a lot of our partner agencies like the Green Climate Fund and the Adaptation Fund, etc. And we apply the LLA principles so far with our projects to ensure that when we do get additional grants, then we're able to assist more communities.
Well, thanks very much, Krista Joy. I think you've outlined sort of how we can actually sort of pioneer some decentralized finance mechanisms, as Alfred's also said, as well as thinking about learning from our experiences as we're going through this. I know that we have some front runners and people who are really doing well, but we also need to make sure we share those lessons. So thank you very much. I think one of the things that's come out is that from the older endorsers and the new ones, we've got quite a lot of lessons to share and learn, and the fact that the community of practice is growing is also a testament to the power of this movement. So with that, thank you very much. I'll ask you to take your seats and hand this back to Claire.
Thank you all so much. So this was just the first in a series of celebrations. We'd welcome you all to come to the Resilience Hub around 7:15 for further celebrations. And if you want to hear more about the doubling of adaptation, the champions of adaptation finance will also be at the Resilience Hub just before from 5:30. So we'd welcome you all to join us on that journey. There are also prizes going on for LLA, which is happening elsewhere, which is why the community is growing, so much happening, we can't even put it all into one series. There's overlapping moments of the day. But thank you all for coming. We look forward to holding this type of event every year and holding some level of accountability. So just because you've endorsed them, it's not over. We'll be calling you back to talk to us about what you're doing every now and again. So please be ready for that. Thank you all so much for coming.